Everybody, this is Dream, and today we have a six-game baseball slate for you that starts at 6:40 or 6:35 this evening. This is the main slate on DraftKings and FanDuel. As you can see, I have three core plays in Mountcastle, Santander, and Hayes between the two sites. Those guys are definitely going to be top-tier options on this slate. We also have some really good pitching today, and we have a kind of a value pitcher that you can opt to as well. But overall, I think the slate is pretty solid. It does have enough value that makes it pretty fun. There are some stackable teams in Toronto, Baltimore, Atlanta, and Texas. You could also look at the Tampa Bay right-handed hitters, though this might be one of the tougher matchups they've had this season against Casale, so we'll have to wait and see how that goes. But overall, this slate is fairly interesting, and I do like it as a good slate to play. With that said, let's get into our plays. Before I get started, can you guys smash that like and subscribe button? It really does help the channel a lot. So for our pitchers on DraftKings, we're going to start with Spencer Strider. Now, he's had 18 strikeouts in the first two games of the season. He's got a pretty good matchup here against a team that struggles to score runs. He's also a top play on the slate, and he's not the most expensive pitcher either. He's a great first pitcher. Then we'll look at Clayton Kershaw, who's playing at a pitcher's park. He also is going up against a team that struck out more than any other team in baseball this season so far. And I'll also add the fact that they have played one less game than most other teams as well. So San Francisco is a team who does strike out a lot, and even more so than you can imagine because they played an extra game, or one less game than a lot of other teams have played. So they really have some rough go from that perspective, and Kershaw can be a really good strikeout pitcher when he feels like it. Kevin Gausman is also in a very interesting spot here for Toronto against Detroit. He's got as much upside as Kershaw, and he's virtually the same price. He's also got a good matchup here, so he's definitely a good option off of Kershaw if you want. And then I do have kind of a value play at this position. Not exactly somebody I would love to play today, but Eovaldi for Texas looks pretty interesting today. He should be able to manage a win and get a decent amount of strikeouts in this game. Kansas City just doesn't look like they're in a great situation here. Though I would want to make certain that the win situation there is in an okay position, so do keep that in mind. But I do think he has some utility on the slate, but he's kind of risky, and he's got a high risk, high reward kind of situation going on this situation. Excuse me. He has given up some earned runs in both his first games, but he is still managing to get close to 20 fantasy points, and he's a little bit cheaper. That helps you pay up for some other options in your lineup if you want. There's also kind of a Hail Mary play at this position, and that's Taj Bradley for Tampa Bay, who hasn't had a Major League Baseball start yet, but he is the best pitcher in Tampa Bay's AAA team, and I do think he's played pretty well. And he also played in the Grapefruit League early in the preseason, and he did pretty well in that situation. The risk here is that he may not play very long in the game, but he's also only $4,000. Boston, though, is a good team, so he is a good hitting team. So it is a little bit risky, obviously, but he's priced so cheap that he can definitely make you pay up at other positions if you want. At catcher, we're going to start with Sean Murphy for Atlanta. Now, he looks like he's in a pretty solid spot here. He finally hit a home run the other day, and he's got another good matchup here against Hunter Green, and so I do think the metrics play out for him. But he's not a must-play by any stretch of imagination because we have both catchers from Toronto here in Kirk and Jansen. Kirk is definitely my favorite catcher at this point, simply because he's got a lot of upside here, and he did hit a home run in his last game. I look for him to have good upside here, and he's quite a bit cheaper than Murphy as well. Jansen's virtually the same price. Even though he hasn't started the season well, he'll have some utility in this matchup in a game where Toronto should be able to dominate. And then if you want a value Hail Mary kind of play, then Jameson McCann, if he draws a start from Baltimore, he would definitely be somebody that has some upside in this matchup. He's high risk, high reward, though, so do keep that in mind. At first base, we're going to look at Ryan Mountcastle, who has just absolutely crushed the ball so far with 5 home runs already this season. He's had 3 home runs in the last 2 games as well. I expect him to have another big game here against Oakland, and I definitely like him in a great matchup here. But if you want a more expensive option, we have Freddie Freeman, who's also in a great spot here for the Dodgers. He's got some nice upside here. He's hit the ball extremely well to start the season, and while he did hit a home run a few games into the year, he hasn't hit one in several games, and he is kind of due, but he is very expensive and hard to roster. Matt Olson, also very interesting for Atlanta. He is absolutely crushing the ball to start the season. He's had a really good start to his season, so I really like him here, and he's a little bit cheaper than Freddie Freeman is, and gives you some upside at that position. At second base, we're going to start with Marcus Semien for Texas, who really is my favorite play in Texas. He has some upside here. He's got all the metrics in his favor, and he's got a good matchup against Kansas City, and I really like him in this situation. Now, I do like Ramon Urias here, who can play second base or shortstop. He's quite a good option for a Baltimore stack as well, and he has some nice upside. He's hit the ball decently well. He does have home run potential included, which is pretty hard to find at second base normally. And the third base situation, we're going to look at Rafael Devers as our top play here. Now, he's high risk, high reward in this situation. He is going up against a pitcher that hasn't played before, so he's got good metrics here, but he is a risky play from that perspective, just being so expensive. Austin Riley, also extremely interesting today. He's hit the ball really solid to start the season. He hasn't even been hitting that many home runs. He had two against St. Louis, but he hasn't hit one since. And this is kind of the type of situation where I like a hard-throwing pitcher to give up a couple home runs against power bats, and he's definitely one of them. Matt Chapman, also very interesting for Toronto here. He's got some really nice upside in this matchup. He's hitting a ridiculous batting average so far this season at .477 with 3 home runs. He's had 3 straight games with home runs as well, and he's had fantasy points in every game this season, including a bunch of them over 10 fantasy points. So he's a great option on the slate and a plus matchup there for them. And then if you want to value play at third base, Isaac Paredes has hit the ball extremely well for Tampa Bay. And if Tampa Bay is going to continue their streak, he'll need to have another good game here. He's played extremely well, and his price has actually come down a little bit, which gives him some nice upside as a value play on this slate. I really do like him a lot here. Then we're looking at the shortstop position, and we're going to take a look at Bo Bichette. Now, he has some big-time upside here, but he's also high risk, high reward. He's hit the ball extremely well to start the season. He's had 3 home runs the last 4 games. He does need a home run to pay off at this position, though, especially at his price, but he is definitely capable of doing it. And if you want an alternative to him, Wander Franco is definitely somebody to consider. He's also hit the ball really well and hit some home runs lately. He's hitting the ball extremely well, but again, his price is very high and definitely requires that kind of home run requirement. Mateo for Baltimore is a good value play at this position. He's hit the ball pretty reasonably this season, and he's got home run potential in this matchup. Again, something that's hard to find at shortstop outside the most expensive guys, so he's definitely somebody that you can take in consideration here. Then we're going to get outfield, and Ronald Acuna also obviously has some massive upside in this game. He has missed on a handful of home runs already this season, where he was just a couple feet short at best at home and on the road, and I expect him to eventually hit some more home runs. And this is kind of the situation where I like it, where he's got a big time throwing pitcher who throws hard, that he can turn a ball around on him and just blast one out of the park. This is the kind of situation where I think he has some big time upside. Then we'll look at Randy Arozarena for Tampa Bay. He has some really nice upside in this matchup. Tampa Bay looks like a solid option on this slate. A little bit risky. Obviously, they've been on a incredible run to start the season, and if they're going to continue it, this is going to be a situation where he's going to have to pay off. Now, he is super expensive, so he is going to be somewhat hard to roster, but he is worth taking a look at on the slate. Anthony Santander and Austin Hayes both have really good upside in this matchup, despite the fact that Santander hasn't played very well. He's had scoring in just about every game, but he hasn't had more than 1 or 2 hits in most games, but he hasn't hit a home run yet, and he definitely has that potential in this matchup. Austin Hayes has hit some home runs this season. He's hitting the ball really solid to start the year, and he's had 2 home runs in the last 2 games, and he's got some nice upside in this matchup again. I really do like Baltimore on the slate as a core stack. And then Harold Ramirez for Tampa Bay. He is kind of a high-risk, high-reward, almost a Hail Mary option here. That you can utilize if you think Tampa Bay stack with right-handed hitters is worth a look. He's definitely somebody to do it with, as well as Margot for Tampa Bay. They are both Tampa Bay right-handed hitters that have great metrics for this matchup, but it's a little bit risky just because they're kind of Hail Mary plays on the slate. So that's what I have here on DraftKings. Let's move over to FanDuel, and from our pitching perspectives, we're kind of in the same boat with Strider and Kershaw and Gossman. All three of them are virtually the same price over here, though, with Kershaw being a little bit less expensive. But all three of them have some upside, got good strikeout potential. I think Strider is the best option, but then Kershaw and then Gossman. Obviously, we want guys that can get over 50 fantasy points today when you have three aces like them on the slate. And I think Strider and Kershaw have the most upside to do that. And then Nathan Eovaldi is also very interesting today as a kind of a alternative contrarian play here. He doesn't really have the same upside those guys have, but he has a good matchup and some utility on the slate, especially if you want to pay up for some other options on this one. At first base, though, we're going to look at Ryan Mountcastle for Baltimore. He's got some nice upside here. He's hit 5 home runs already to start the season, including 3 in the last 2 games. He's got all the upside in the world on this slate, and his price is super fair. So he's a really good option on this one. Matt Olson, also very interesting today for Atlanta. Has some nice upside here. A little bit risky simply because of his price, but if you can afford him, he's definitely somebody to consider. Freddie Freeman is also very interesting today. He's actually a little bit underpriced here on FanDuel, so that gives him some upside here, and he's got home run potential in this situation. Marcus Semien is also somebody I really like for Texas at second base. He has some nice upside, and he's priced so fair that he's almost impossible to avoid on this particular slate, especially at a position where it's somewhat difficult to find great options here. But we also like Ramon Urias, but you can actually put him at third base as well, which gives him some good utility as a good option here on the slate. He has some nice upside, and he can play 2 positions that are relatively hard to find good value in. Then we're going to look at third base here, and we're going to look at Rafael Devers, who has some brilliant upside here. Obviously, it's super expensive, but he's high risk, high reward in this matchup. And I don't know that he's going to be that easy to roster on this one. Yandy Diaz, if he does play, which I don't know if he will play today or not, but it looks like he will play according to the manager. I do think that he's got some good upside in this matchup, assuming that he's not hurt too badly, so we'll have to wait and see. But I do think he's got some good utility at matchup situation here. Austin Riley is also a good option here on this slate at third base. Third base is pretty loaded today in value when it comes to FanDuel, and Austin has hit the ball pretty well, and he's got a nice matchup with home run potential. And then Paredes for Tampa Bay has some really good upside, and he's also cheap. If you think Tampa Bay can win this game, which their right-handed hitters should have some good opportunities here, he's definitely somebody to fit in your roster. Then we'll look at shortstop, and Bo Bichette is a clear top-tier option here. He's got a home run potential. He's hitting a ridiculous batting average this season at .353. He's got nice upside here and has some good upside for this situation. Franco is a good alternative if you want to stack Tampa Bay. He is pretty expensive too, though, but he is viable with the home run potential and all that, all the good play that he's done so far this year. If they're going to keep rolling, he's going to have a good game. And then Jorge Mateo for Baltimore. He's kind of outside of looking in on the Baltimore stack on FanDuel, but he has some utility here, and he's probably one of the few good value plays at this position. Then we're going to look into the outfielders, and we're going to start with Acuna, who has big-time upside here in a plus matchup. His price is pretty high, but he's still pretty reasonably he's got a reasonable situation here. Randy Arozarena is actually a little bit underpriced here. He has home run potential in this matchup, and Tampa Bay has some really good upside. In general, Anthony Santander and Austin Hayes both have some really good upside here. I really like both guys. Santander is due for a home run, and I think he could potentially get it here in just a completely great matchup for him. Same goes for Austin Hayes, who has hit a few home runs this season. He's actually hit 2 in the last 2 games. I look for that to hopefully continue in this matchup and him be a good opportunity for Baltimore, who should score a lot of runs today. And then Adolis Garcia, he's a guy I really like for Texas. He's got some good upside here, but he's a little bit pricey considering the other options available. But if you can fit him in, he's definitely worth somebody to consider in a Texas stack. And then Yoshida for Boston. He's high risk, but he's going up against a pitcher who hasn't had some history in the majors yet, and so he could be in a unique position to where nobody's going to have any info on each other, and he could definitely hit a home run in that situation. So with that said, guys, thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below, and have a nice day, guys.